This video is part of our 7-video series on the causes and effects of the current war, its history, and its future significance. Check out the full series for the complete picture. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow ribbon of water barely 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, stands as the world's most critical oil choke point. Over 1/5 of global petroleum liquids, including crude oil, condensates, and refined products, transit this waterway daily. A significant disruption here would not merely impact energy markets. It would send seismic shocks through the entire global economy, triggering an immediate and dramatic spike in oil prices. The financial stakes are immense, potentially costing the world economy trillions of dollars in lost output and soaring inflation. This isn't a hypothetical exercise, it's a constant geopolitical pressure point, with every tanker navigating its waters carrying not just cargo, but the fragile stability of international trade. The immediate consequence of any closure would be a rapid escalation of Brent crude prices, potentially pushing them into uncharted territory, far beyond previous peaks. Such a surge would ripple through every sector, from transportation to manufacturing, fundamentally altering the cost of doing business and living for billions. The world's reliance on this single passage makes it an unparalleled vulnerability, a strategic flashpoint where regional tensions can quickly ignite global economic catastrophe. Understanding this vulnerability is paramount for anyone tracking the pulse of international finance and geopolitics. Historically, the Strait of Hormuz has been a focal point of geopolitical tension, underscoring its strategic importance. Its geographical constraints mean that any significant naval or military action can effectively bottleneck global energy flows. The sheer volume of traffic, including massive crude oil tankers and liquefied natural gas, LNG, carriers, makes it a complex and high-stakes environment for maritime security. Beyond oil, a substantial portion of the world's LNG also passes through this strait, making gas markets equally susceptible to disruption. The implications extend far beyond the immediate energy supply. They touch upon the intricate network of global supply chains that depend on stable and affordable energy. Nations across Asia, Europe, and North America rely heavily on these shipments, making any threat to the strait a direct threat to their economic well-being. The challenge lies in the lack of viable alternative routes for such massive volumes of energy, leaving the global economy with limited flexibility in the face of a crisis. This geographic reality creates a persistent tension, a constant undercurrent of risk that influences everything from defense strategies to long-term energy planning. The economic fallout from a Hormuz closure would be swift and severe. An oil price spike would immediately translate into higher costs for consumers at the pump and for businesses reliant on fuel. This inflationary pressure would not be confined to energy, it would permeate across all goods and services as transportation costs rise. Refinery margins, already sensitive to crude price volatility, would face unprecedented pressures, potentially leading to reduced output and further supply constraints. The ripple effect would extend to global supply chains, already strained by recent events, as shipping costs skyrocket due to increased insurance premiums and the necessity of longer, more expensive rerouting. Emerging markets, often more exposed to energy price fluctuations and with less fiscal capacity to absorb shocks, would be particularly vulnerable. Their currencies could face significant depreciation, exacerbating inflation and potentially triggering debt crises. The interconnectedness of the global financial system means that an energy shock of this magnitude could quickly cascade into a broader economic downturn, challenging the stability of even the most robust economies. Maritime security in the Gulf region is a constant concern, with naval patrols and international cooperation aimed at safeguarding shipping lanes. However, the threat of disruption, whether from state actors or non-state groups, remains. The immediate financial consequence for shipping companies would be a dramatic surge in tanker insurance premiums, making voyages through the strait prohibitively expensive or even impossible. This financial burden alone could deter traffic, even without an outright closure. Should rerouting become necessary, the costs would be astronomical, adding weeks to transit times and significantly increasing fuel consumption. The global energy market's ability to absorb such a shock is limited. While OPEC nations possess some spare capacity, it is not nearly enough to offset the loss of 20% of global oil supply. Similarly, strategic petroleum reserves held by major economies offer a temporary buffer, but they are designed for short-term disruptions, not prolonged closures. The sheer scale of energy passing through Hormuz means that no single alternative mechanism can fully mitigate the impact, leaving the world reliant on the continued, unimpeded flow through this narrow passage. The confluence of these factors paints a stark picture. A prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz represents one of the most significant black swan risks to the global economy. The potential for a global recession, driven by an energy shock, inflation, and supply chain collapse, is a tangible threat. Currency markets would react violently, with safe haven assets surging and commodity-dependent currencies plummeting. The long-term strategic implications are profound, forcing nations to re-evaluate energy security, diversify supply sources, and invest in alternative technologies at an accelerated pace. Diplomacy and de-escalation efforts would become paramount, as the economic cost of conflict in this region would be borne by every nation. Understanding these vulnerabilities is not just an academic exercise, it's a critical component of risk assessment for businesses, investors, and policymakers worldwide. The Strait of Hormuz remains a stark reminder of the delicate balance that underpins global prosperity, a balance constantly tested by geopolitical realities. Staying informed on these critical energy choke points is essential for navigating an increasingly complex global landscape.